Welcome to this tutorial brought to you by Gospel Beats. This is Java interview questions study guide. This is a high-level overview of the type of interview questions I have been asked in the past, multiple junior Java development roles. This will not be a detailed or in-depth explanation of these Java concepts, but rather a high-level overview to let you know how to answer Java interview questions such as a phone interview screening. In my experience, just knowing the answer to the questions they ask, even if you can't fully demonstrate the answer in code, just knowing the meaning of the terms can go a long way when you're trying to land a job with a potential employer. This is my own personal study guide that I'm going to use to study, similar to flashcards, and hopefully it can potentially help someone else who may be in a similar situation. You should already have understanding of the base or core Java language, which there are many tutorials out there that provide you with the core knowledge of Java. However, from my experience, many employers don't ask questions regarding the core concepts. They tend to ask you questions about the uncommon concepts that they don't cover in many tutorials. So I just decided to create a cheat sheet to help myself get through the interview process. Alright, so these are the topics we're going to cover in this video. Methods, interfaces, all types of classes, finalizers, pass by reference, strategy pattern, declaration, aggregation, enum, threads, common topics, uncommon Java topics, and a touch of Spring. And a lot of these topics was questions I actually got asked during a Java interview, so that's kind of how I compiled this video. Alright, so we're going to start off with methods. Method signatures is a part of the method declaration. It's the combination of the method name and the parameter list. So the highlights in red is key terms to kind of help you remember and remember the definition of the terms. Alright, method overloading allows a class to have more than one method having the same name if the argument lists are different. Method overriding allows a subclass or a child class to provide a specific implementation of a method that is already provided by one of its superclasses or parent classes. Alright, so unique methods. Final method cannot be overridden. An abstract method are declared without any implementations. They are declared with the purpose of having the child class provide the implementation. Static method, a method that belongs to a class rather than an instance of a class. They can be called without creating an object of the class. Method clone. Object cloning refers to the creation of an exact copy of an object. It creates a new instance of the class of current object and initialize all its fields with exactly the contents of the corresponding fields of this object. So method clone is an exact copy of an object. Factory method, a factory pattern or factory method pattern, just define an interface or abstract class for creating an object, but let the subclasses decide which class to instantiate. In other words, subclasses are responsible to create the instance of the class. The factory method pattern is known as virtual constructor, creating objects without specifying their concrete classes. Interfaces. An interface is an abstract class where the methods in an interface are abstract with only method signature, no body, must be implemented by another class with the implements keyword. Marker interfaces are empty interfaces, no fields, no methods. So an example would be you would use an if statement and you would say instance of this interface. If it's an instance of this interface, then you run this function. So that's a reason why you would use an empty interface to kind of help you sort through what classes implements this interface. Alright, moving on. Abstract class versus interface. So I get asked this a lot. Alright, so this is what they say online. Methods. Interface can only have abstract methods. Abstract class can have abstract and non-abstract methods. Final variables. Variables declared in the interface are default final. An abstract class may contain non-final variables. Variables. Abstract class can have final, non-final, static, non-static variables. Interface has only static and final variables. Interface versus inheritance versus abstraction. An interface can be implemented using the keywords implements. An abstract class can be extended using the keyword extends. Multiple implementation. An interface can extend another Java interface only. An abstract class can extend another Java class and implement multiple Java interfaces. Abstract class has private protected members. Interface class members are public by default. Alright, types of marker interfaces. These are the interfaces with no methods or fields. Remote interface. A remote object is an object which is stored at one machine and accessed from another. So to make an object a remote object, we need to flag it with remote interface. Here, remote interface serve to identify interfaces whose methods may be invoked from a non-local virtual machine. Clonable interface uses the method clone method. Serializable interface used to make an object eligible for saving its state into a file using file output stream. It gives permission to that object. So if you want to save an object to a file, you have to make the interface serializable. An externalizable interface, just like a serializable interface, is just like a serializable interface, except it contains two methods, write external and read external. It gives you more control over your serializable interface. Alright, moving on to classes. Classes. Subclass. A class which inherits a method or methods from a Java superclass. Superclass. A class which gives method or methods to a Java subclass. Alright. Inner and outer class. An instance of inner class cannot be created without an instance of outer class. And an inner class can reference data and methods defined in outer class in which it nests. So we don't need to pass reference of an object to the constructor of the inner class. For this reason, interclass classes can make programs simple and concise. Now, if you don't understand what that means, we're going to go more details on the next slide. So interclasses. So interclasses are static classes, member classes, anonymous classes. So a static class, only nested classes, nested static class doesn't need reference of outer class, but non-static nested class or inner class requires outer class reference. Inner class or non-static nested class can access both static and non-static members of outer class. A static class cannot access non-static members of the outer class. It can access only static members of outer class. Member class, non-static class. Anonymous classes is an inner class without a name and for which only one single object is created. Alright, abstract classes cannot be instantiated but can be subclass, contain abstract methods. Immutable classes means that once an object is created, we cannot change its content. Wrapper class is a class whose object wraps or contains primitive data types. When we create an object to a wrapper class, it contains a field, and in this field we can store a primitive data types. In other words, we can wrap a primitive value into a wrapper class object. Wrapper class, that's definitely a question I get asked all the time. What is a wrapper class? Singleton class, another one, can have only one object, one instance of the class at a time. Enum class represents a group of constant, unchangeable variables like final variables. To create an enum, use the enum keyword instead of class or interface, and separate the constants with a comma. Note that they should be in uppercase letters. So the keyword for enum class is constants. Helper class is a Java class which includes basic error handling, some helper functions. Helper class contains functions that help in assisting the program, provides common methods which are required by multiple classes in the project. Helper methods are generally public and static so that they can be invoked independently. Each method of a helper class should work independent of other methods of same class. Generic classes, similar to interfaces, the difference between regular and generic classes is one is only the type parameters in the class definitions. Finalizers, final variables. Now, I've been asked this a lot of times as well. Final variables, they cannot be changed. Final class, whenever we declare any class as final, it means that it can't be extended. That class can't be extended. We can't extend the class, and the class can't be extended. And we can't make a subclass of that class. If the class is declared as final, then by default all the methods present in that class are automatically final, but not the variables, just the methods. Final method, it means that we cannot override that method. Finally, keyword is used in association with a try catch block and guarantees that that section of code will be executed even if the exception is thrown. Pass by value, another popular one. Passing copy of that object. Java always passes by value, not by reference. So this is an example, a screenshot of an example of how pass by value works. So in person 1 we have a value, in person 2 we have a address to the actual value. So in person 1 and person 2 we have the same address pointing to the same object. So if you happen to change if they point to the same object, and if you change person 1, you change the value of person 1, it would change, the person 2 value would change as well, because they point to the same object, or they point to the same value. So in Java, one object, if the object has the same value, if you change the value for one object, it would change for the other one. Alright, strategy pattern. It's another one. It's a behavior design pattern that turns a set of behaviors into objects and makes them interchangeable inside original content object. In strategy pattern, a class behavior or its algorithm can be changed at runtime. This type of design patterns comes under behavior pattern. Our uses: it reduces a list of conditionals, if statements. It saves on duplicate code. It forces other classes from changing. It reduces forcing other classes from changing, and it reduces the exposure of code to the user. My personal interpretation is interface is presented by an object in the superclass. It's an interface presented by an object in the superclass. Abstract factory is a creational design pattern which solves the problem of creating entire product families without specifying their concrete classes. The client code calls the creation methods of an object, of a factory object, instead of creating products directly with a constructor call new operator. Alright, delegation can be the alternative to inheritance. So it's similar to inheritance. Delegation is simply passing off the duty to someone else. So delegation means that you use an object of another class as an instance variable and forward messages to that instance. It's better than inheritance for many cases because it makes you think about each message you forward before the instance of a known class, because the instance is of a known class rather than a new class, and because it doesn't force you to accept all the methods of the superclass, you can provide only the methods that really make sense. Delegation can be viewed as a relationship between objects, where one object forwards certain method calls to another object called its delegate. And the reason I'm using a whole PowerPoint slide on one concept, because these was questions that I didn't know that I got asked during a coding interview. Aggregation. It represents has a relationship. It's a unidirectional association, a one-way relationship. For example, department can have students, but vice versa is not possible, and thus unidirectional in nature. Okay. In aggregation, both the entries can survive individually, which means ending one entity will not affect the other. Okay, Enum. A special data type that enables for variables to be set with predefined constants. Variable must be equal to one of the values that has been predefined for it. Enum set. It extends abstract set and implements set interface in Java. A class is a member of the Java collections framework and is not synchronized. Alright, it's a high performance set implementation, much faster than hash set. All the elements in the enum set must come from a single enumeration type that is specified when the set is created, either explicitly or implicitly. Enum map is ordered collection, and they are maintained in nature order of their keys. Natural order of keys means the order on which enum constant are declared inside enum type. So they just predefined constants. Kind of can help you remember. Threads. Thread pool reuses previous created threads to execute current tasks and offers a solution to the problem of thread cycle overhead and resource thrashing. Multi-threading is a Java feature that allows concurrent execution of two or more parts of a program for maximum utilization of CPU. Each part of such program is called a thread. So threads are lightweight processes within a process. Thread and thread groups. They allow multiple execution flows to proceed concurrently. Every single application in Java has at least one thread called the main thread. Threads in Java are instances of a class thread. Alright, common Java topics. Inheritance, process by which one class takes the property of another class. Polymorphism is having many forms, perform a single action in many ways, perform a specific behavior based on a specific situation. Encapsulation is all about hiding the implementation details, like state, internal methods, from the outside world. The benefits of encapsulation are maintainability and the ease of change. The less intricate details a class is exposed, the more control developers have over changing their internal implementation without the fear to break the existing code. Annotations. Annotations help to associate metadata information to the program elements, instant variables, constructors, methods, classes, etc. Garbage collection. Automatically, when new objects are created, the memory is automatically allocated for them. Whenever the objects are not referenced anymore, they are destroyed and their memory is reclaimed. Super keyword. Refer to parent class objects. It refers to the constructor, instance variable, or method of the superclass. Static keyword is part of the class. Do not need an object to use the method, variable, etc. Uncommon, important Java topics. Composition is a restricted form of aggregation in which two entities are highly dependent on each other. It represents part of relationship. In composition, both our entities are dependent on each other. When there is a composition between two entities, the composed object cannot exist without the other entity. Association. Association is relation between two separate classes which establish through their objects. Association can be one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, many-to-many. Explicit constructor. Java creates constructor by default. Hash code. It returns an integer value generated by hashing algorithm. Objects that are equal according to their equal must return the same hash code. Initialization blocks contains the code that is always executed whenever the instance is created. It is used to declare initialize the common part of various constructors of a class. It runs before the constructor. Static initialization block is a normal block of code enclosed in braces and preceded by the static keyword. Instant variables can be initialized in constructors where error handling or other logic can be used. Java agent is a regular Java class that must implement a public static void pre-main string agent args instrument method, which becomes a I should have took that out. Agent entry point, similar to the main method for regular Java applications. Recursion, the process in which a function calls itself directly or indirectly, is called recursion, and the corresponding function is called as recursion function. Alright, boxing and unboxing are the names of the same technique used in Java language to convert between primitive types like int, long, double to respective primitive type wrappers like integer, long, double. For example, converting integer to int. AutoBoxing is the automatic conversion that the Java compiler makes between the primitive types and the corresponding object wrapper classes. For example, converting int to integer class. So unboxing is converting integer to int, and boxing or AutoBoxing is converting int to integer class. Spring, inversion of control, outsourcing the creation of objects using Object Factory. Dependency injection, retrieving necessary components for object. Field setter constructor injection. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm gonna use this video as a study guide to kind of play and just kind of use, like I said, use like flashcards, and hopefully you can ace that next interview. Thanks for watching.